Hello YouTubers, Alaska Prepper here. Sorry for the view. It's a very dreary morning here in Alaska, in Fairbanks. And it's been like this for like the last, 4 or 5 days. And it's supposed to be like this for the next few days. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining in today. I've had a lot of questions in the chats, especially during my live streams and on other videos about this topic. And I'm going to kind of break it down into two topics, and I'm going to give you my opinion. And by all means, please jump in the comments and let us know what your opinions are. But the questions have been similar to this. Will there ever be a full-blown martial law in the U.S.? And or do I think that the UN would ever put troops or boots on the ground in the U.S.? Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to support a great company that is an American-owned company that operates here in the U.S., go ahead and give Hero Soap Company a look. Their link is below in the description of my videos. And ladies and gentlemen, let me just tell you this. I am affiliated with them. However, every penny that I make from the Hero Soap Company, which is not much, but it's a little bit, goes to my Buy Me a Coffee account, and it goes to charity. So if you want to support a small business that's here in the United States and a small business that cares about its community, go ahead and take a look at the Hero Soap Company. Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for joining in today. So let's get into this. In the United States right now, there are a total of about 2 million service members that are either on active duty or that are in a reserve or National Guard capacity. All right, so roughly 2 million, maybe 2.1 million. However, you have to keep in mind that a large portion of that number, especially on the active duty side, are deployed overseas and or stationed in other countries overseas. Remember that the U.S. occupies militarily about 170 or so countries with over 800 bases. Something like that. My numbers may not be exact, but something like that. So what would it take for there to be martial law in the United States? And what does martial law mean? It pretty much means the end of our constitutional rights being protected under the law. Meaning that the government can take whatever actions they deem necessary in order to bring circumstances back to where they are appropriate according to that government. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you have to understand this. 2 million people, okay, 2 million service members, let's say they were all here in the U.S. In my opinion, it's just not enough manpower to handle 300 plus million people. As far as I'm concerned, it wouldn't be enough manpower to handle 150 million people. So let's take the military, for example. Let's say we have martial law enacted in the United States. First of all, if it is enacted, I don't think it would be enacted countrywide. Why is that? Because there's only about 2 million service members in the United States, and not all of those are active duty. There's only about 1.2 million service members on active duty. And you have to remember that a lot of those are deployed and or are stationed outside of the borders of the United States. In addition to that, we have roughly 700,000 to 800,000 maybe Reserve and National Guard. So let's say about 2 million service members in the United States. And let's say they were all here. So I don't see how 2 million people, no matter what kind of equipment they have, yes, some people say, well, they have planes, they have the things that go boom, they have tanks, they have MRAPs, they have Humvees. We can't contest against that. Ladies and gentlemen, I would have to disagree. Look at Afghanistan. Look at how long we've been there. All right, look at every time that we put a bigger piece of machinery out in the field in Afghanistan, they just make stuff that will work against that machinery. First, we started out with unarmored Humvees, and they were getting torn up. Then we went up to armored Humvees. And then they came up with things that would destroy those and the people inside them. Then after the Humvees, they came up, I believe it was with MRAPs. And they're still making things that will destroy those. And now I forgot the name of the newest vehicle they have out there, but it's like a super duper Humvee. It's like a combination between a Humvee and an MRAP. It's huge. And they're still finding ways to destroy those. Why? Because they are fighting what's called a war of attrition. It's guerrilla warfare. And if martial law happened here in the U.S., in the entire country, that's what I see happening. Now, when I say that's what I see happening, is it going to happen after the first day? Probably not. People will probably be in shock. They'll be like, is this really happening? But if it hangs around for a long time and it becomes a force that the people are very dissatisfied with because they can't live their lives, just like what's happening overseas, right? People that are fighting against the U.S. overseas, they're fighting because they want to live a life the way they want to live it, whether we agree with it or not, okay? I'm not saying that what they're doing is right or wrong. That's besides the point. But the reason they're fighting is because they pretty much have nothing left to lose. Because if they can't live their lives the way they want to live it, then they don't care if they have to die for it. See, and that's what would happen in any country, I believe. If a military force tries to take over for a long term. Now, like I was saying before, as far as cities, I can see it being more likely that martial law would be enacted in and around very populated areas, like populated cities, like on the coasts. Because that is where most of the people are concentrated. And when you enact martial law, what is it that you want to control? You want to control the people. So to me, it would make more sense that if it was enacted, it would be enacted on a regional basis and not the entire country as a whole. And going back to the notion that if it was enacted in the entire country as a whole, it would be disastrous. Because I see people going out and doing terrible things against any force that tries to control their lives to the T. And although I've mentioned in the past that I believe that we're living in a soft martial law, right? It's kind of like a soft martial law for the past several decades. We can still leave the house when we want. There aren't checkpoints every 3 miles. We don't have to show our papers at checkpoints every 3 miles. You know, we don't have military stopping us. Right now, we deal with law enforcement. But what I mean by a soft martial law is that there are so many laws on the books that we have to follow that we can't even keep track of them. So in a way, we are being controlled by a pen, whereas in a hard martial law, we would be controlled by force. Right? Because even when you're controlled by a pen, by someone writing a law, you still have an option on whether you want to do something or not. But in a hard martial law, you don't really have a choice. You know, they can come into your home. Pretty much the Constitution is abolished during that period of time. So I believe that it is very unlikely that we have a hard martial law across the nation. Now, in a city, like I said before, that's a different story. It depends on how bad things get and how inept the state government in whatever particular state it may be is at trying to correct what's gone wrong in that state. All right, so that's where I stand on martial law. And I really want to get your opinion on whether you think that it is possible for the U.S. to enforce martial law for a long term? And do you think that if martial law is enacted in any way, do you think it would be localized to a populated area or to a region where there is a severe problem or what the government may see as a severe problem? Do you think it would be localized? As far as boots on the ground in the U.S. from foreign troops, right? Someone asked me this question. Do you think that the UN will deploy foreign troops on U.S. soil? there is no way that boots on the ground from foreign militaries will ever hold the U.S. And there's only one reason behind that. Because we have the Second Amendment. And although it's been fought against for the longest time, we still have it. And even if for some reason, by the stroke of a pen, it goes away, which I don't think that would happen, all right? Because it would take 75% of all of the states to do a constitutional amendment. But for some reason, let's say, if by the stroke of a pen, the Second Amendment should go away, I still think we would still be the most heavily armed country in the world per capita. Right? The most heavily armed country in the world per capita. Some people think that's a bad thing. But ladies and gentlemen, if you think back of the atrocities that have occurred in history, all right? We all know about Germany. We all know about Russia. We all know about Italy. All right? Well, I think we all know. I hope we would. We all know about Cambodia. We all know about when a dictator took over in the Philippines back, I think it was in 65. The very first thing that dictator did was demand that the population be disarmed, or they would face execution. But let's put that aside. That's not what this conversation is about. I want to tell you a quick story. And the reason I remember this story that I'm about to tell you is because for some reason it came across my video recommendations a couple of days ago. I don't know why, but it just did. But it was about a man, and I forget his name, but you guys may know the story. It was about an ex-Los Angeles Police Department officer that felt that he was wronged by the system. He felt that he was wronged by the system as a whole. To put a long story short, he was fired from the LA Police Department for lying, although if you listen to the entire story and you read different articles, which I did, it seems to me that maybe he was falsely incriminated and plotted against in order for a different officer to be able to keep their job instead of him to be able to keep his job. However, this person got angry enough that he had absolutely nothing left to lose. He pretty much lost everything. He lost his job. He was a reservist in the Navy. I think he was a lieutenant in the Navy as a reservist. He lost his clearance in his official capacity in the military. He wasn't allowed to stay in the reserves, so he pretty much got kicked out of the reserves. He got fired from the LAPD. His family and his friends pretty much were against him. He lost it. This is a man that lost everything and had nothing left to lose. One man, ladies and gentlemen, one person. The LAPD and the surrounding law enforcement in that area put on a massive manhunt that I think lasted 6 or 7 days. There were hundreds of officers trying to track this guy down to either capture him or get rid of him. Hundreds for one man. This guy ended up taking the lives of, I think it was 4 or 5 people, injuring several other people, and causing havoc amongst that community. Hundreds of officers. They even had a $1 million bounty on his head. But hundreds of officers. That's what I'm trying to get at. One person caused havoc for over a week where none of those officers felt safe. All right, he put out a manifesto naming like 50 or 70 people that were within the police department and people that he had known throughout his professional career. And every one of those people had protection assigned to them. This is one person, ladies and gentlemen. Do you honestly think that if we get boots on ground from any kind of invading force, that the American people will just sit idly by and be willing to lose everything and have absolutely nothing left to live for? And once a person or an animal gets pushed into a corner and gets poked at hard enough, they will either succumb and give up, or they will fight. And if they fight, they will fight harder than anything else. Why? Because they have nothing left to lose. So ask yourselves, with the amount of firearms and with the amount of people that are willing to use those firearms here in the United States, do you think that we can ever have an invading force that can hold ground in the U.S.? Another thing that I want you to think about is this. When I said that there's, and I'm talking about the force invading the U.S. now, when I said that there's about 1.2 million active duty service members in the U.S., if there was an invading force coming into the U.S., would our active duty military be able to stop them? Let's say that they cannot stop them. Then what happens? Well, we have to turn to the citizenry, right? But AP, the citizenry isn't trained for war. Well, most of the people in the revolution, the American Revolution, weren't trained for war either, but that's besides the fact. The point I'm going to put out to you here is this, is that right now in the U.S., we probably have close to 30 million veterans in the United States, of which about 20 million or so are not disabled. So even if you take 10% of the 20 million that have been trained at the very minimum on how to service a firearm and how to point it and squeeze the trigger in the proper manner, that's another 2 million people. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, if something like that happened, if we were invaded by a foreign force, it would not be war as we saw back in the Revolution or the Civil War. It would not be a linear battlefield, meaning that there's one side and then that there's another side, and that one side shoots in this direction and the other side shoots in this direction. It wouldn't be linear. It would be more like guerrilla warfare. So if you have 2 million able-bodied veterans that are willing to pick up and fight, who know the country that they live in, who know their region, who know their area, and who are willing to sacrifice their lives because they know that if we don't win, that there's nothing to live for, and who can use guerrilla tactics, do you really think that a foreign entity, a foreign military, be it the UN, be it any other country, can take over our land for a long time? A lot of people will probably say, well, what if they did an EMP? Okay, they can do an EMP. But what I'm saying is this: if they did an EMP, more than likely we'd do an EMP on them. Right? Even if they caught us by surprise, we'd still be able to retaliate. So even if you put the equation of having an EMP in there, it would still be very difficult for them to hold ground in the U.S. Now, this is my opinion. I hope this never happens, ladies and gentlemen, because it would be a terrible thing. But I want those of you that think that we can be invaded and that boots can hold U.S. ground, I want you to be at ease, because I really don't feel. That's not something that I worry about at all. My biggest worry, if I have to call it a worry, because there's really nothing I can do about it, my biggest worry for the future of our nation is the forces within our own nation. I believe it was Abraham Lincoln that said that we would never be occupied by a foreign force, or that we would never be destroyed by a foreign force. That if the United States is ever destroyed, it will be from within. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so I hope you got something out of this. I hope that it was at least a little bit entertaining. And sorry for the dreary morning here. Not too much of a view. However, I think that next week is supposed to be nice and sunny again, which is good because I'm going to have a few days off of work so that I can get ready for my property to get leveled off. So I hope that you guys have a great week ahead of you. Thank you very much for joining in. And hey, go check out the Hero Soap Company. Those guys are really good guys, and they make a great product. And not only that, they are an American company working in American soil, operated by a veteran who hires veterans, who donates part of his profits to law enforcement and first responders. So if you guys want to get some great soap and you guys want to support a small business here in the U.S., clean yourselves up by getting some of that Hero Company soap. God bless every one of you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining in today. Remember to be good to each other. When good people do good things happen. Remember to reach one, teach one, and repeat. If we all did this, the world would be a better place, and you know that it will be a better place. Many blessings to all of you and your families. This is Alaska Prepper, and I am out.